Welcome to Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 10, the Who Doesn't Love a Parade episode. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
In this episode, part 2 of our popular brand new segment that we hope will be as fun to listen as it was to record, the Analysts. In this edition, we're talking about the future of department stores, what retailers have to fear with agentic AI, shopping bots, some fun rapid-fire questions, and more. Our expert panel is comprised of 3 of the foremost blue flame thinkers in retail and retail tech: Sucharita Kodali from Forrester Research, Neil Saunders from GlobalData Retail, and Simeon Siegel from BMO Capital Markets. Steve, if part 1 was a pile of fun, how would you describe part 2?
Well, piling on the fun, I guess. I think not only is it a lot of fun, but a lot of insight, some topics that we've definitely covered on the podcast before, but we go deeper on them, and a few new things or things we haven't touched on in a while. And yes, as you mentioned, we got blue flame thinkers, so they've always got great perspective. We didn't get into any real fights, though. Maybe a little fisticuffs, but I would have liked a little bit more drama, but that's just me.
Well, that's that new segment we're workshopping, Fight Club, Retail Fight Club. We'll get back to that for maybe season 11.
Yeah, maybe we'll get the analysts to crash a Christine Nome press conference in California just to take the heat up a little bit.
What goes on? All right. Speaking of traveling, start spreading the news. The Remarkable Retail Podcast will be in the Big Apple in a couple of weeks. We will be surveying what's hot and new in terms of retail stores for our YouTube channel, and a whole lot of action happening at the Commerce Next Growth Show. Run it down for the people, Steve.
Yeah, well, it's less than a week until the Growth Show kicks off, so I just thought I'd very quickly go through some of the things we're doing for those of you that will be there. And if you're not going to be there, what are you even doing with your life? Go register, use Remarkable, get a discount. But anyway, we hope to see lots of you there one way or another. Starts on a Tuesday, so a week from the day this episode is coming out. But our big day, selfishly, will be Wednesday at 3:25 p.m. We'll be on stage recording our season finale episode live on stage. And special bonus, the first 150 attendees of that session will get a free copy of the second edition of Remarkable Retail. Then we'll almost have to sprint over to a different stage because you and I are hosting the Commerce Nexties Awards ceremony. That's at 4:45. And then I'll have to sprint again to another location, which we'll put on social media and will be on the conference website and all that kind of stuff. I'll be doing a book signing, so that'll be 5:30-ish. But Wednesday is a big day, but Thursday's big as well. I'm going to do a second book signing, assuming some folks aren't going to be able to attend the first one. That will be at 10:25. And then wrapping things up, big closing keynote from Joe Kudla, founder and CEO of Vuori. So I will be on stage with Joe at 1:35 and then dashing to the airport, most likely.
Well, and we'll have a podcast studio, so be sure and wave and say hi. We'll be recording, getting some insights from the people at the show, and that will be our summer content. So it'll be fresh summer content for the summer. You and I will be taking a bit of a break on the mic together to refresh and recharge in advance of season 11, but there'll be fresh content all summer long. So stay tuned and tune in for that. Hopefully we'll see you in New York City. All right, let's dive into the news of the week. Well, if there's a global volatility index, it probably popped last week, eh?
Yeah, well, always the danger of talking about current events. As people obviously would know, hostilities have broken out again in the Middle East. Obviously not good in many, many ways. And we'll see how that all pans out. Again, by the time people listen to this, who knows what the situation will be. Specific more to the economy and retail, there most definitely could be a major inflationary impact due to the increase in oil prices. We saw oil prices go up right after Israel did their quote-unquote preemptive strike on Iran. Some folks have speculated that if things were to escalate, we could see oil prices over $100 a barrel again. So that would have direct consumer impact, but obviously impact on businesses as well. Now, this also happened, I guess, a couple of days after the World Bank predicted that the world would see its weakest growth since the 1960s unless there was a major and swift course correction on U.S. tariff policy. So it remains to be seen what will happen there. But we've had enough, I guess, hard to understand things in the news in terms of the direction of the economy, the consumer, and the impact on retail. This just, I guess, adds more fuel to the fire.
Talking about volatility, let's talk about the U.S. labor supply. Almost 50% of workers in the ag sector are undocumented, which means two things. One, in the current environment, it's a great place to raid for undocumented aliens, I guess, and
yes,
or undocumented people. And two, a lot of people aren't showing up for work because it's pretty obvious they show up to work, they could have a one-way ticket to Palookaville. So how is this all going to play out? It's not the only sector that's affected by this fear of showing up for work or fear of going shopping or whatever. Talk about it.
Well, there's a couple things that developed over the past week. Many of our listeners, I'm sure, will have seen, the general news about the increase in deportation raids on the part of the Trump administration. I think it was pretty clear. We talked about this, I think, earlier in the year, given the stated objectives and policies of the administration, that they were going to have a hard time meeting their numbers by just kind of maintaining the way the U.S. has historically approached going after undocumented workers. Their numbers were, and I'm not going to make any political comments about it, but it was pretty clear they were not on a path to hit their numbers. And so, as was speculated on the part of many people that understand this far better than I, they were going to have to start going to the places you mentioned, going to agricultural sites, going to the parking lot of Home Depot, going to chicken production plants, these kinds of things in order to get their numbers up. And that is what has happened. And of course, lots of people aren't too happy about this. So this is why we've seen protests. The LA protests obviously got the most news over the past week and a half, I guess, at this point. But lots of protests. I mean, protests here in Dallas, where I live, protests in New York. I mean, there are tons of protests we're recording this before the day of protests that are happening. So it'll be this past weekend. We'll see what that looks like. Hopefully everybody stays safe. This all adds to uncertainty and volatility, which, as we talked about, is not a good thing. The specific thing is the impact on the workforce. And even before these raids escalated and we've got the political discourse, the workforce in the U.S. has already shrunk year to date. We've seen some surveys just this past week. 70% of employers surveyed by the employment and labor firm Littler expect immigration policy to have a significant or moderate impact on their workforce, i.e. they'll be rounded up or they won't show up. And that rises to 89% for retail and hospitality companies. I don't think they specifically looked at agriculture, but presumably those numbers would be disproportionately high. Now, in one of the, I'm going to say just dumbest, blinding flash of the obvious statements, Trump said, our great farmers and people in the hotel and leisure business have been stating that our very aggressive policy on immigration is taking very good long-time workers away from them, with those jobs being almost impossible to replace. This is not good. Duh.
He's clearly not a listener of the Remarkable Retail podcast.
Right.
And a lot of other things.
Yeah, that is incredibly obvious. You know, why ICE has not raided Mar-a-Lago is a whole other topic. Trump has famously hired undocumented workers. But anyway, the impact on this clearly can be shortages of products, service levels at restaurants and hotels, wages having to go up to try to attract workers. Yeah, none of this, again, regardless of your politics or feelings about what immigration policy should be, the impact on retail and the economy more broadly could be quite significant, and the administration is showing really no signs of backing down. If anything, they're doubling down. The other thing I found really interesting
they might though exempt them, right? I mean, what I feel like they might, direct them away from. They might exempt workers on the farm. Like when the administration says, obviously this is a problem, to me it says to the ICE people, stop going there, go somewhere else.
Yes, right, absolutely. I mean, I think whoever has the biggest checkbook is going to probably have a greater chance of affecting administration policy. If the past is any indication of what might happen in the future, spoiler alert, it most definitely is. The other thing I think was interesting from a retail perspective is Circana released a study that Hispanic consumers are pulling back on store visits and accordingly spending, I think probably for obvious reasons. So again, not great for retail outlook if the environment continues to be so hostile, I guess you could say, to undocumented workers.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't care how much you increase the rate of roofers, they're not suddenly going to appear, and you're not suddenly going to find 10,000 roofers even if you double their pay. They're just not there to be had.
Yes.
So, we've talked about housing starts and the drag on the economy from that. That doesn't need any more sand in the works. Anyway, let's talk about inflation. So inflation is very moderate, but the vibe I get is it's the calm before the storm. Would you agree?
If you wanted to make the case that some of us, myself included, are being Chicken Little about the slowdown in the economy and the increase in inflation, recent data would suggest you might be right. What I have heard, and I want to get your perspective on this sort of broadly about how the tariff policy is affecting pricing, we haven't seen it show up yet, for sure. Most folks seem to think that we are 4 to 8 weeks from it really starting to take hold. And that is partially because of the general worry, and this is a topic we can get to in a second, but the general worry that the economy is not in a place where consumers are likely to not decrease what they buy if prices go up a lot. But there was also a ton of promotional activity in April and May. Now, whether that is retailers trying to get ahead, I mean, I've heard some theory that retailers are worried about how much inventory they're sitting on, kind of ironically. So they're trying to get in a better cash flow position. They think consumers are very wary, so get out ahead of that and, kind of the race to the bottom kind of thing. Or you could just look at it. I talked to one retailer where they basically look at their pricing strategy and say, well, I own it at a lower cost, so why would I raise the price? I don't think that's the right way to think about it. But, there's that mentality. Like once I start having it flow through my income statement at a higher cost, that's when I'll worry about price. And that, may not happen for 2-3 months. So I had a couple conversations, or I was part of a conversation where there were a large number of senior retailers as well as some other industry analysts, bankers, et cetera, where we talked about what was going on with pricing. And pretty much everybody said, calm before the storm. But the interesting thing in terms of approach was this 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 approach that more or less a third of their time is going to work with suppliers to either get pricing down or to shift where the product was coming from, which is for the most part away from China to lower tariff areas. 1/3 is we're going to absorb it ourselves. We're just going to have to take the hit and we'll try to save money, or we're just going to live in a lower profit environment for some period of time. And a third would go towards strategically raising prices. And a lot of that had to do with either, and I know we talked about this a couple of times, either just preemptively raising prices where they think the customer is going to be okay paying that price because they're not super sensitive, but then testing their way more into price elasticity to see what the effect on gross profit dollars are. But I think you've had some conversations with retailers as well on this.
Yeah, the one thing I would put in that middle third of the oar is about what they're going to do with taking hits on the margin. It's been a very expansive conversation about, well, maybe we should increase our free shipping threshold. Yeah. Like go different places to find costs to cut or impacts that are different, but still, add up to income and help the gross margin.
Or lean on their loyalty program more, because sometimes, point bonuses, the consumer sees as more valuable than the actual cash impact of profitability. I've heard that a little bit too.
Let's talk about earnings. There's a few earnings. We're at the end of the cycle. We talked about one that we were very, very interested to see what would happen. Talk about RH.
Yeah, RH, so a big furniture player, a brand that we've often talked about on the podcast because of some of the ways they've innovated their brand over the past decade or so. Furniture business, which has been slow for years now. Gary Friedman, their CEO, has frequently characterized the situation as the worst housing market in 50 years. And of course, a lot of product made overseas. So there's been a lot of concern. Their stock's been taking a hit for a while because of the perception of both the general market dynamics, but also their particular sourcing strategy. Well, they surprised in a very good way. Their revenue was up 12%, which is very uncharacteristic. I mean, that's a good number really for any retailer.
For anybody.
But particularly for the big ticket kind of categories. They profit was, a little weaker than it has been historically, but I think their operating margins are 13 or 14%. Many retailers don't get close to that, even quite good retailers. And they basically affirmed their guidance. What they said was they expect to take a hit on revenue for the next few months because of customer uncertainty and the tariff impact, but they expect to kind of get back on track fairly quickly. Obviously they made the usual comments about uncertainty. They're delaying some things they were planning to do. They did also talk about people that have been following RH at all over the last 6 to 12 months. There's been some criticism from Wall Street analysts as well as others saying, well, they made this big push internationally, opened stores in, I think maybe Munich, Brussels, a bunch of European markets. They aren't outside of London, and they're not doing very well. But that's maybe not a failed strategy, but a big underperforming strategy. They did talk about their international results improving quite a lot. Now, it's fair to say that it's a relatively small base. It's fair to say that objectively they have underperformed the way they talked about that expansion 3-4 years ago when it really got going. So doubts still linger, but quite strong performance, and the stock has responded accordingly. Just a few others I'll hit really quickly. Inditex, which most people will know is the parent company of Zara, we're seeing a lot of mixed results from apparel players. They delivered a pretty weak, or at least kind of quarter, but the main piece of news really lines up with what we've just been talking about, is that they warned that they expect the business to slow down considerably over the summer, both because of weak consumer demand, as well as the impact, well, I guess it's all related, but the impact of tariffs on their business. Lastly, Victoria's Secret. We talked last week about how Victoria's Secret was supposed to report. They didn't because of a cyber hack problem, I guess you would say. They did release their results, and they've been, as many people will know, we did one of our YouTube videos visiting a Victoria's Secret store. They've been trying to get their business turned around. So far, not much evidence of that. Their comps were down 1%. They're basically a break-even business, also a business that is exposed to tariff risk. So they were, again, like a lot of these retailers, pretty non-committal, or just saying, we don't really know what this is going to look like. We're worried about it. So I think those are the ones. There were some others, but those were the ones that really stuck out as kind of interesting to me.
You mentioned the cyber attack at Victoria's Secret, also the big distributor for Whole Foods, and many other small grocers had a big cyber attack. So Whole Food shelves are starting to run out of product. The cyber thing, we don't talk about it that much, but when I ask retailers my, what keeps you up at night question, they're like, it's when, not if, it feels sometimes about these cyber attacks, and they're pretty debilitating, and they, it happens to great companies. It's not
absolutely. It's
not a weakness.
The criminals seem to always be, or often, one step ahead of where most companies and the cybersecurity firms are. So yeah.
Well, it's certainly not criminal behavior, but Saks did post some big losses that are, could technically be a crime against profitability. Talk about it.
Well, we've talked about Saks Global's gyrations and troubles post the Neiman Marcus acquisition multiple times. I think the last time we talked about them was a few weeks ago, where questions were being raised as to whether they were going to be able to make their first big bond payment. It looks like they're likely to. They've been working to get some additional financing. They were successful in getting a $350 million lifeline. There are reports that they are starting to repay vendors a little bit ahead of the schedule, the very controversial schedule that had been laid out a few months ago. So still lots of concerns. When they met with creditors, apparently they explained that they had an adjusted loss last year of $100 million. That more or less, I'm a little unclear on exactly what's in those numbers, but they have been pitching that the first year of the merger, they would have $700 million in profit. So you just kind of get a sense of the chasm they need to cross. There continues to be a lot of questions about the financial health of the business. Their bonds that they issued are still yielding over 30%, I believe, last time I checked. So that's pretty darn risky. The other two things I thought were interesting, and you could maybe say these are signs of desperation or just good growth strategy. I think one more than the other. Rumors that they are looking to expand Bergdorf Goodman. So many people would know Bergdorf Goodman has, when I worked at Neiman's, we always talked about it as one store, but it's technically two stores, the women's store on one side of the street at Fifth Avenue and the men's store across the street. But essentially it's one operation. So just in Manhattan, maybe they would look to expand in some other markets. I would say from my own personal experience, without getting into too much details, there has been interest in expanding Bergdorf Goodman to places like the Middle East, potentially to Asia. Sovereign wealth funds, I think, might be interested in helping that under the right circumstances. So we'll see. It's not so easy. Maybe if this gets to be more of a real story, we can talk about why I think that is. The other one, which got way, way more controversy, is that apparently Saks Fifth Avenue, so one of the nameplates under Saks Global, is going to be doing a line of products at Costco. And many people thought that is really a dumb branding move.
Yeah.
In addition to the shop, I mean, this is kind of in the category of Saks Fifth Avenue being a marketplace or a microsite, I guess you would say, a marketplace type site within Amazon. Is that really diluting the brand? Yeah. So I would say I'm skeptical of that, but desperate people do desperate things, perhaps.
In my mind, you can put up a store in Amazon all you want. Nobody will find it unless you pay Amazon. So, it's a forest in the trees thing. Costco, that's a different matter. A lot of people will go and see that product. So, that's interesting.
Yeah, the thing, I mean, I do question it, I would say. But one of the things that's interesting that people might know, and maybe I'm getting a little in the weeds here, but neither Saks Fifth Avenue nor Neiman Marcus really has much of a private brand business. There and for the most part, things that would be labeled Saks Fifth Avenue or labeled Neiman Marcus are in things like men's underwear. They're more like commodity products. Now, Saks Fifth Avenue has been more developed in their own branding strategies. They own or they bought the IP from Barney's. So, you could maybe convince yourself in kind of a capsule collection, so to speak, that you're really emphasizing your private label, which is more like a private brand kind of offering, like here's a high aspiration brand at a great price. And if it's done in a limited way, maybe it works. But they're definitely crossing the boundaries, at least, of traditional distribution strategies for luxury brands. And maybe that's just the world we're in, like part of me, which is the world is changing and old ways of thinking about this are clearly eroding. But I suspect this is a little bit more of a reach for some short-term cash and free brand exposure, basically. Not free, but brand reach.
All right. Let's get to part 2 of our brand new feature, The Analysts. We're going to pick it up with me talking to Sucharita about Agentic AI, and then we're going to get on to the future of department stores. All right, so Sucharita, we left off last episode talking about Target, and I wanted to spend some time with you. We'll get to our third and final big story in just a minute, but we wanted to focus, we went through that whole episode, 27 minutes without saying the word AI, which I think for the 5 of us is some kind of record. Now,
I was wondering if you're going to do it previously on.
Obviously, you work at Forrester. Obviously, you stay abreast of technology. I was talking to a bunch of retailers last week, and we were talking about Agentic AI, and it's the latest bright, shiny object, and the heads were nodding. Now, some of the retailers are like, uh-oh, is this another intermediary between me and the customer? Can this be used for good or evil? Where are all things Agentic, and where are we headed?
So I think that there is a lot of misperception around what some of these terms mean. Typically, when I hear of agentic, it really is something that's truly autonomous and is able to decision on its own, similar to a driverless car. So imagine that level of autonomy and goal setting that ultimately leads to an end result. So are very many retailers ready to embrace full agentic? I'm not sure that a lot of them are ready to go that far because that would probably be quite risky for their businesses at this moment in time. I don't know that there's quite the trust in agents completely just acting on their own, whether it is inventory decisioning or having conversations with shoppers in a customer service format. There are some exceptions. I would argue that Amazon has some parts of its business that are very agentic, but they're the exception, not the rule. There is a lot more of what Scott Wingo calls faux-gentic solutions that are out there. They're not quite fully autonomous, but there's a human in the middle, or there's a human that ultimately has to make the decision, but there is a lot of automation that may not have existed before that is now in place that can help reduce costs and in some cases even create a better customer experience. I don't know that we are completely there at every retailer yet, but I do think that there are elements of promise.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how worried should retailers be that this is another thing? Like if consumers grab hold of agentic and they're given an agent that goes and finds them the best deal and the best product, how worried should retailers be about now? Okay, now I got to manage that like SEO and Google back in the years prior. What are you hearing?
Yeah, that's a great question, Michael, because you're talking about one application of an agent, which is like a shopping agent that an LLM, like a chat GPT or Claude or somebody would or a consumer facing chatbot, like one of those companies would do. And there are many other agentic applications. The biggest issue, so how fearful should you be as a retailer? You should be quite fearful because this is absolutely, you would be disintermediated and you'd need to probably pay to play in any of those formats. But there are a lot of things that would need to happen before we get to, I think mass adoption of any type of a shopping agent. It would have to be actually quite good. Consumers would need to actually use it. I mean, we're still in Forrester's own data. Most people still are not using ChatGPT on a regular basis. I think we all think we are because we use it maybe on a regular basis, but the average person isn't there yet. So, and we also have the incumbent players, whether it's Amazon or Google, that I don't know have fully unleashed their powers here. I think a significant part of why ChatGPT has gained any share has been largely because Google's been terrible. Their academic research papers on this, some German academics in 2024 actually proved that Google search results were objectively worse. And I think that that's given oxygen to LLMs, to step in and be better versions of what Google Google has become what Yahoo was in like the year 2000, and Google has lost its way. So can Google get its mojo back? It could. And if it does, I think, kind of what we are talking now about shopping agents could be a very different conversation in a couple of years.
Yeah, it's a bit of the classic innovator's dilemma there for Google, right? So we are on to big story number 3. Now, this is a topic we probably could spend a lot of time on, which we don't quite have. So we'll ask everybody to be as crisp as they can. But is a department store renaissance possible? I think we all know that department stores have lost a lot of market share for quite a long time. But every once in a while, there is this hope, some evidence that perhaps people are returning to the mall, returning to certain brands, but a lot of activity. Nordstrom going private, the Neiman Marcus Saks merger, transformations going on at Macy's, Kohl's, Penny's, as well as over in the UK at Tesco, John Lewis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So is this all a lot of running to stand still, or is there any hope here? And if so, what does that look like? Simeon, you're up first. What do you think?
Dun, dun, dun. We know the department store model works because it's called TJX. And so when done right, people absolutely want a one-stop shop for something that can sell a lot of different things. Now, obviously, that's not what you meant when you talked about department stores. But sure, when done right, and Neil does an excellent job at both calling out the positive negatives from what he sees through his checks. So this will be a fun one to hand off to. But I think the hard part, or the model that doesn't work, and you know it better than anyone, Steve. I mean, like the idea of whether you're remarkable or not goes back to you no longer exist because of your location. It's not convenience that wins. It has to be the curation, and it has to be the experience. It has to be a reason that I'm coming to you, and it can't just be because you're the closest player. So I would tell you, I think what the department store model that you referred to has to be continually honed, but the notion of will people want to come to a single location to get all the things they want? I mean, it's happening. It's happening really well.
The one thing I think is maybe a little bit different, or another dynamic, is, and it gets back to kind of the D2C thing, right? Is you have so many of the manufacturer brands, I mean, particularly on the luxury side. Like the big difference between today and when I was at Neiman Marcus is we didn't have nearly the number of brands that had opened these showcase stores basically right outside our door. So that has been a big shift. And, I guess we see that to a lesser degree in the moderate space. Sucharita, what's your take on this?
As malls, department stores is envisioned as the flagship locations in traditional malls, I think are very challenged in large part because the malls are also challenged. When you look at shopping districts and what are the shopping districts that are growing, they're often mixed use places. It's a combination of a lot of hot restaurants with hip retail. And many of those locations just don't have enough space for a large multi-category, multi-brand store. So the notion of retail, physical shopping has just changed so much that I'm not sure that a high-end luxury or even higher end department store makes a lot of sense. Now, to Simeon's point, I mean, it's not just TJX. I mean, Walmart's arguably, any mass merchant is multi-category, multi-brand. So arguably the department store definition has changed by going, significantly down market. But the traditional Macy's, I think that it's sort of the swan song.
Well, we'll try to be a little hopeful on this. I don't know, Neil. I mean, you spend a lot of time often sharing photos of folks that aren't executing particularly well. What would you add to this conversation?
Well, I think it's very interesting because I think, as you said, Steve, the market share has gone down dramatically. It was about 14.5%, I think, in 1992, and now it's hovering around 1%. And that is an enormous decline. And I think some of it was structural. The way we shop changed. The internet became much more of a thing. The mass merchants became much more of a thing. Now, you can argue that all of this is self-inflicted because, of course, department stores should have evolved along with these changes, but they didn't. But I think we're in a slightly different position now. I think we have a bit more structural unwinding, but actually a lot of the decline that we see is self-inflicted. Because you go into a store like Kohl's and it's like, well, why am I here? What's the reason that I'm here? And I honestly struggle to find one. What I think is interesting and perhaps more hopeful is I think some chains have now woken up and are smelling the coffee. If you look at Macy's, for example, I think Tony Spring has been a breath of fresh air because he's a merchant. He's come in and said, hey, look, we need to improve the proposition. We need to give people reasons to come. And we still have dead wood we need to cut out, and let's not invest in those spaces because they have changed in terms of where people are shopping. But in the good places, the good spaces, let's reinvent the model. Now, that's going to take a lot of time. But, there's no reason, as Simeon says, why this can't work. There's no reason why selling a lot of different things under one roof is a model that should fail. It works in a lot of other instances. It just comes down to creating a relevant selection of products and an interesting place to shop. And I think that's where a lot of department stores, especially in the US, I think it's where they still fall short. But hopefully they'll reinvent and they'll find something that pulls people in and they'll get back to growth. They'll never get back to 14.5%. I don't think any of us believe that. But it can stem the bleeding.
Can I add one more thing? Sorry, it's
Sure.
It's about beauty and the beauty space, and a significant part, Steve. I think that this probably resonates with your experience in department stores. Is so much of the driver historically in traditional department stores was beauty, but beauty has essentially been kind of chopped out and sent over to Sephora, Blue Mercury, which is part of Macy's and is one of their growth stories, and even Ulta. And when you've taken what was one of the biggest traffic drivers, which was the lifeblood of what was originally why people would come. It was the reason for being, and it's now replicated in small formats in other venues. They do need to find either what's the next chapter, or is it even newer beauty brands? Because the current model just has too much competition.
Traffic driver and margin driver, right? I mean,
Yeah.
A lot of the margin in department stores at Hudson's Bay, it was there in the credit card.
Yeah.
Without that, it's a big hole.
Yeah, I often say that if you want kind of the snapshot of retail of the last 20 years, you look at Ulta's market cap being, not to make it all about stock market value, but Ulta's market cap just selling 10% of what department stores carry. Their market cap is greater than the top 4 U.S. department stores market caps combined. So, I mean, the value shift has just been unbelievable. All right, well,
we're starting a dangerous conversation by going market cap, though.
I know. All right. Anyway, all right. So I'm mindful of our time, Neil. We wanted to just kind of follow on a little bit with the thread that we were talking about with your focus question. As I mentioned, you've been famously going out to a lot of retailers, taking a lot of pictures, showing off shoddy execution, occasionally celebrating good execution. So I'm just curious, as you go around and do these store visits, who's impressing you, I guess, both positively and negative in what you're seeing out there in the great American retail landscape?
I think, contrary to perhaps some of the posts, the negative ones tend to do better, so we focus on those a little more. But there are some very good retailers out there. Crate and Barrel, I think, consistently excellent. I think they understand their lifestyle positioning. They make very mundane products like plain white tableware look exquisite. The signage is really interesting. There's such good attention to detail. And you can argue, hey, they're in interior design. They should be good at this stuff, but they are good at this stuff. And it really shows. Abercrombie & Fitch, we've spoken a little bit about, and I think they are very good. I think they have a store model that really works. They've gone away from these vanity flagships to something that's very, very relevant, nicely merchandised. The black nightclub vibe has disappeared and has been replaced by a very clean-cut, shoppable store, and they've been on a journey to reinvent themselves. I think they're really good. Bath & Body Works, I just think Bath & Body Works... It's not just that the stores look consistently good, because they do. It's also that they look consistently good in the strangest of places. I've been in malls basically that have been dilapidated. They look like, they're on their last legs, because indeed they are. And you'll walk through and suddenly you'll see in the gloom this bright, shiny Bath & Body Works. And it's like, wow. And you just think, like, if there was an actual proper apocalypse, not a retail apocalypse, but an actual apocalypse from a nuclear war, you'd probably stumble through the rubble and come across this bright, shiny Bath & Body Works that would be like, oh, hey.
I'm pitching that show to Netflix.
Yeah, that's the next marketing campaign.
We'd all have nice smelling hands from all their soap, too, in the apocalypse. There'd be an upside.
What do you think the zombie scent is?
I don't know, but they'd probably have one because they're on trend. So I think
dead roses. I'm going for dead roses. That's my pitch.
Charred rubble might be another one.
You got to be careful with the bath scrub if you're a zombie. I'm just saying. You
do. Yeah, you don't want that. So I mean, they're good. Dick's, I think, is exceptionally good, and Anthropology, again, really great store experiences. So there are so many retailers that I think execute well. And it comes down to, as I say, the consistency as well. And they consistently get it right, and it's consistent across the store portfolio. And I think that is something that helps them, because they've all had pretty good results, and it does make a difference.
And is there a brand? I mean, we talked a little bit about this in the department store context, but is there a retailer that you see that you feel, has a solid value proposition and it's really their execution that's holding them back?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think that I think Macy's is one of those. I think that Macy's has a place in the market. I think Macy's could do a lot with private label, and it has been doing a lot more. It is a middle market retailer. That makes it very difficult, and we've discussed that many times before, Steve. But I think there is a role for Macy's, but I think traditionally it has been a victim of extremely poor execution. But in a category like home, there's no reason that Macy's couldn't have shades of Williams-Sonoma, shades of Crate and Barrel in home. There's no reason it couldn't have shades of Sephora in beauty, bringing this together under one roof. It just hasn't done that traditionally. And hopefully it will start moving towards those things with the model it's putting into place now.
Really quick, I think it's a really interesting question you ask, and I think it's a question you can answer quantifiably. I think the question you just asked is another way of saying who has a lot of revenues and who does not have a lot of profits, which goes back to conversations we have had a lot. And so I think you can look at Nike, you can look at Victoria's Secret, you can look at Under Armour, you can look at Peloton. There's a lot of brands that have a lot of permission to be here, as evidenced by their revenue sizes, that everything else, their perception, ask the question of execution.
All right, so this was a fantastic discussion, and we've got another thing to add on to it, a lightning round. And we've got a few things. We're going to throw out a question or a phrase, and I guess we'll be kind of like I'll be like that teacher in elementary school. If nobody speaks first, I'll ask somebody. But so let's get going and let's see how it goes. First of all, TikTok. Are they going to still be operating in the U.S. by the end of the year? What's going on?
Sucharita told me she wanted to answer this one.
Well, if it's not TikTok, it's going to be Instagram that's going to step into that void. But if I had to, I'm just going to leave it there.
All right.
I would say I hope it is. I don't like the idea of banning things. I don't think we should be banning stuff. So I hope it's still here, but who knows?
And you don't mind that on the other side of the ocean they ban stuff. You don't think it's a reciprocity. You think freedom of the people here.
I think the people should decide what they use and how they use it. I don't think it's the place of government to be telling us.
All right. Simeon, any last thoughts on Tiki-Taki? Lots of value there. Somebody might buy it.
I carry a different view that I probably shouldn't go into because I'm not looking at it from the retail side, but from all the other anarchy that it's causing. So I will. I think I will step aside from this one.
All right. So
Simeon, the Switzerland of.
I think there was a political statement in there.
This was not Switzerland. This was not a Switzerland.
Okay.
My perspective is TikTok is a great for the burner phone market. I'll leave it there. Steve, over to you.
All right. So quick thumbs up, thumbs down, or want to dodge it. Retail media networks, overhyped, underhyped, or I guess properly hyped?
Totally overhyped, but still delivering cha-ching for most of the retailers that are doing them. So it will continue to be hyped.
Totally agree. I think the notion of getting money by means other than selling goods by capturing your traffic is not new. We're just calling it. It's a different format, it's a different name, and it's a different buzzword.
Yeah, I would say I'm absolutely sick to the back teeth of hearing about it. Because it's not new. It's not new, as Simeon says. It is important, and it is an incremental revenue stream, and that's great. But the big players are going to win. The smaller players will dabble in with it. And at the end of the day, you need to crack on with keeping your core proposition intact and not get too distracted by all these sidebar things.
All right. This is one where we'd love you to weigh in. The average U.S. tariff rate on Chinese imports 6 months from today. What do you think?
I think we should use a random number generator because I think it's going to be as useful as our predictions. Because I think the problem with it, you can't have a rational conversation because the whole policy is irrational and made up on the hoof, which is unhelpful for forecasting. So the honest answer is I haven't a clue.
It also needs to be a dynamic random generator because it's going to change as soon as we come up with one.
All right. Sucharita, any different perspective?
I'll say 10%.
There you go. All right. We like a stake in the ground.
He's on the board. There you go. One person was on.
I'm definitely more in the who the hell knows camp. All right. Last one, in keeping with the title of the podcast of the Remarkable Retail, who's your favorite up-and-coming Remarkable Retail brand and why? Who wants to weigh in first?
I don't know that it's new, but I definitely think that it is on a growth trajectory that will definitely be capturing attention for years to come as Aloe.
And I'll go with its sister or cousin or whatever, because I noticed you're going to be speaking with the one and only Joe Kudla soon. And I believe they have done an excellent job at Viore as well.
Thanks, and appreciate the plug. That's Commerce Next.
I quite like a brand called 11T. It's not new. It's been around for some time, but it is creeping more into department stores at the luxury end. I just like the simplicity of the brand. I like how clean it is, and I like how it justifies its price points through good manufacturing, good materials. It feels a bit different to some of the other luxury brands. It's a bit more modern. So I hope that they continue to grow and see success.
This has been great, right, Steve? This has been just a pile of fun. And listen, we want to thank each and every one of you for sharing your insights and your openness to this fun new format. Simeon, employee of a Canadian bank, Sucharita, clear-eyed perspective, and Neil and your board-back teeth. That's a wrap on the inaugural episode of the Analysts. Thanks, everybody. Safe travels. We all travel a lot, so safe travels to everybody. Looking forward to seeing everyone in those travels. Let's leave it there. Thanks for tuning in. New episodes of Season 10 are available each and every Tuesday, so be sure and tell all your friends in the retail industry all about us. And make sure and visit our newly refreshed YouTube channel for exclusive video and our new virtual store tours. If you liked our episode, please take a moment to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts.
And I'm Steve Dennis, strategic advisor, keynote speaker, and best-selling author of 2 books, Leaders Leap, Transforming Your Company at the Speed of Disruption, and Remarkable Retail, How to Win and Keep Customers in the Age of Disruption. You can learn more about me, my consulting, and keynote speaking at stephenpdennis.com.
And I'm Michael LeBlanc, consumer retail growth consultant and advisor, keynote speaker, and media entrepreneur. You can learn more about me on LinkedIn. Safe travels, everyone.